Our next speaker will talk about one of the key things urban planners need to deal with these days, and that's parking. And the next speaker is PETR ONDRÁČEK, the city architect for the city of Třebíč, and he will address parking among other things and how they succeeded with implementing changes in Třebíč. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I will try to get to my presentation. I'm really sorry on behalf of the organizers. Maybe better you could start and then we will switch on your slides. So yeah, thank you very much. I will follow up on the mayor of Litomyšl in Třebíč. In my hometown, we are trying to be at least as good as Litomyšl. My name is Petr Ondráček and I'm the city architect in the city of Třebíč. What I would like to do today is to present our city and our approach to public spaces. It's already been mentioned that parking is one of the things that we deal with intensively. The same goes for greening. But I think that all these things have one common denominator, and that is public spaces. I really hope that at some point I will actually get my slides, but before that happens, let me present Třebíč. Třebíč also is a UNESCO-listed town. It's already been 20 years since we became a UNESCO heritage site. We also like to say that we are a very compact, small town. We have 35,000 inhabitants. Once again, sorry on behalf of the organizers for the mess up with the presentation. We are working on it. So, as I've mentioned, we have 35,000 inhabitants. Třebíč grew a lot in the 1980s. That was tied to the construction of the Dukovany nuclear power plant. And now we are actually losing inhabitants. The number is going down, and here you can also see the slides. We lose about 300 inhabitants every year. Maybe this trend will reverse in the future, but right now that's what's happening. So we remain a very compacted, small town, but with complete facilities, public facilities. Our inhabitants do not need to leave because everything is in Třebíč for their disposal. Let's hope that I can also get to some other slides from the presentation. Don't seem to be very successful. Maybe Petr, you can try the clicker. Yep, it seems to be working already. So thank you very much for this impro beginning. Okay, let us now talk about public spaces and what public spaces are to us. We believe that public spaces are the theater or the stage of the city. Some of them are the stage where things happen. People traveling to go shopping, traveling to work, traveling to and back from school. And then we also have public spaces where people want to spend their time. And then we have benches, we have front gardens of restaurants, we have urban furniture, and that's what we could call the city auditorium, where people sit down and look around and observe the life around, and that's what brings the added value to the public space. The question to ask is why some public spaces work and some don't. I believe that one of the key aspects is what we call genius loci, the atmosphere of the place. And what we see is that if a place attracts people, it then attracts more people. So if people are already there, more people will come. People want to be sociable. They might not even interact, but they like to observe people and spend time in a group. And what always works is children and also water features. If you want a successful public space, put in children and water features. But what makes a bad public space? These days it's heavy traffic, because with it comes noise, emissions, a sense of insecurity and danger. It's also visual smog, advertising, which is everywhere, and it hides the actual character of the buildings, and also crime. That definitely is demotivating for people to spend their time in public spaces. So what are some of the prerequisites for a good public space? First, it's people. You can't have a good public space without people. They need to be safe for children. Here we come back to the question of transport. You either need to completely completely get rid of cars, or at least limit the car transport. The place needs to be nice, it needs to look nice, it needs to have very nice atmosphere, and it also needs to have greenery. That's also one of the hot topics these days. Because greenery is good for our mental health. Whenever we are surrounded by plants and trees, we feel better. So these are the key prerequisites for a good public space, and we try to use all of these in the Charles Square in Třebíč. It has been renovated by the Brno-based architectural studio called RAW, and their job was to completely change the face of the square. So they designed different paving for the square. They introduced 2 different water features. This is a more traditional stone fountain, and then there is also a gold ring that also is a water feature, and it serves as a misting device. Then it's also about new urban furniture, trees, and I will also talk a bit more about trees. And then there is also a retention basin, a retention tank in the middle of the square. So all rainwater from the entire square goes to this retention tank, and we then use the water to water the trees and the plants. So that's about the square itself, but it's not enough to just change the public space itself, because you also have the facades of the surrounding buildings and the architecture around the square, and that's privately owned. So what you need to do as a city, you need to regulate. So that's why we have a manual for public spaces. It's a brochure that clearly outlines advertising, it outlines and regulates gardens, front gardens of restaurants and things like that. When it comes to those front gardens, we said that we need to get rid of the old ones, and that restaurants need to get new ones, and they need to comply with the new regulation. Here, our regulation is slightly different that in other cities. We wanted to have a clear border between the front garden and the rest of the street, and we prefer, or our preferred version is flower boxes, as you can see here in the picture, because it is safer for the customers of the restaurant, it's more pleasant. Also, for visually impaired people, it is easier to navigate, and also aesthetically, it simply looks better. And it really nicely creates an in-between place between the private and the built area and the public space. We run a subsidy program for the front gardens, and we also don't have any fees for using the public space for front gardens of restaurants. And now the topic of parking. So this was the same square, the Charles Square, before the renovation. It worked, and it was used as a parking space. And that is probably the case for many public spaces in Czechia. And we decided to change that. We decided to change our parking policy. This is not a popular decision, and so I believe that the sooner you do it, the better. So what happened? People park their cars in Třebíč, in the city square, even though they don't really live in Třebíč. They just came from surrounding villages, parked in the city square, and then continued by train or by bus someplace else. This is what it looks like now. So we reduced the number of cars that can park, and we also made sure that people do not park their cars for the entire day. We have a system of fees, so the longer you stay, the more you pay per hour. The first hour is for free, so if you are local, you need to do your shopping, you come by car, you don't pay a parking fee, and then you can leave. What we also do, we limited the number of parking permits that we issue to our residents. Again, to prevent people parking their cars long term at the square. We want the square to be used for events, for social events, for interactions, for markets, so we bought new stands. So when there is a market day, the vendors can use it. And we really want the square to be a center of public life, so there are cultural events, so really almost every weekend the square is filled with people attending an event. And so this is the highlight of the new square. It's a water feature. It was created by the H3T architects. It's an architectural and design studio. It is a huge golden ring, but it also is a fountain. It's also a misting device. And so it really is this very unique water feature. So now we have this beautiful, beautiful square, but what we still see is what we might call the administrative area effect. Into such an area, people come for work, but when opening hours are over at 5 p.m., everybody leaves, and the square is not a lively place anymore. So we are asking the question what to do about it. And the solution isn't too difficult, it isn't too complicated. What we need to do is to bring back people who actually live in the city center. In order to do that, we actually cooperate with the Technical University in Brno, with their architectural faculty. And what they did is to analyze the city, looking for inner potential to prevent urban sprawl. So the students analyzed Třebíč and were looking for capacities that could be used to make the city more compact. And they are using what used to work in the past, using the traditional city blocks that make a clear division between the pure public spaces and inner courtyards. What students also factor in their analysis is the concept of 15-minute towns. So a very different concept. It's already been mentioned today. So rather than having different zones for different purposes in a city, what you want is to have multifunctional neighborhoods where you have shops, where you have administrative centers, where you have everything you need and all the facilities you need within a 15-minute walking distance, because this distance really is optimal when you want to encourage people to walk rather than drive. So this is a multifunctional building that includes places where people work. It has apartments. It has places where people can spend their free time. And now a special story about how we try to plant trees at our square. The original design for the Charles Square included two different lines of trees, one on the outer edge, one on the inner edge. You can see it here on the visualization. And the Heritage Institute was against it. They said that there shouldn't be any trees at the square itself. And they said that we need to get rid of them. So the architects got rid of the trees, but suddenly the design was no longer cohesive. We had benches, but we didn't have trees, so it just was a bit weird. There was no shade. So suddenly the quality of the public space was diminished. But we decided not to just accept it, and the mayor just made an executive decision to plant the trees anyway. So we were fined, we were withheld subsidies from the subsidy program that we were using, but we had the trees. But we just didn't want to accept that we are fined and that we have lost the grant money. We decided to appeal the decision of the Heritage Institute. We wanted a review of the decision. And we have appealed a number of times, so at the end, the decision ended up with the Directorate General of the Heritage Institute. And all the negotiations were very tough, but in the end, they gave us a green light. And which means that also the local office of the Heritage Institute said yes. So now we legally have trees in the square. And I told the story in a very streamlined, straightforward way. It was much more complicated than that. But now we have these beautiful pear trees that bloom in spring, and now in the autumn they are brightly colored, so they really add great value to the space. We're also trying to plant trees anywhere we can because we have a climate adaptation strategy for our town. We know that we will not reverse climate change by planting a couple of trees in our square, but they are important for us, and they play an important role and send an important signal. The adaptation strategy also tells us that our city needs to basically work as a huge sponge. It needs to retain and absorb water, not to just let it drain to the local river. Now about transport, which again is very closely connected to public spaces. We have a sustainable urban mobility plan. And in accordance with this plan, we have changed our parking policy. That's exactly what I've mentioned. So originally, the maximum amount you could pay for a day's parking was 30 Czech crowns, so about €1. But now we have increased the price for an entire day, while the first hour is for free. So first hour is for free, but if you want to park for an entire day, you need to pay €10. So we encourage people to just park short term. If they need to go by car for whatever reason, they can park there, but we want them to leave and not to use the parking spaces long term. Another thing we did is an underpass under a busy street. In our city, unfortunately, there is a big, important transit, not necessarily a highway, but a very important road. So we needed to do something about it because it was very uncomfortable for pedestrians, and also there is a major cycling route. And so we solved it with an underpass. So now it's a shortcut for both pedestrians and cyclists, and so they don't need to use the very busy road ahead. Another thing is the rerouting of cycling paths. We published a call for a new design for cycling paths, and we completely redesigned the entire network. We also got new signs, and now we actually also have a cycling route around the town. For example, Vienna has this, and we decided to draw inspiration from Vienna and have the same thing in Třebíč. Also, new signs for cyclists. We have clearly marked cycling corridors and cycling lanes. We actually haven't really announced these in advance, so it was a bit of a surprise for drivers. So actually, we had to do all of that ex post. So afterwards, we needed to explain what it means for drivers and how to approach cyclists and how to interact with them. We also have shared bikes in Třebíč, and the city is encouraging people to use them. So the first 30 minutes of cycling is for free for residents. So that's how the city encourages people to cycle. Another way how to support cycling. I think that, again, it is about mindset. So basically, we can say that the more cyclists you pass on your drive to work, the easier it is for you to then find an empty parking space in your destination. I think in Czechia there is still a great rivalry between cyclists and drivers, and I think that what we need to do is educate people a bit more here. So that's about transport in the city proper, but we also want to have nice public spaces around the city. We also would like to have a green belt around the city, a network of public spaces, of parks, of places for relaxation and entertainment. The first of these projects has already been implemented. It's a cycling path or a roller skating path, and it is very popular with our residents. People take walk there, and it is also widely used by skaters, by cyclists, and we would like to also put in more of these projects to create this green belt. Last but not least, how do we communicate all of this with the public? In case of some projects, we do surveys beforehand. So we ask residents for their input, gathering their ideas and finding out what their needs are. In case of one of the projects, specifically the sustainable mobility map, for sustainable mobility plan, we used this experience map so people could record which parts of the town they feel safe at. and which they believe are dangerous. We also tried to have a school street and to close it for traffic for 1 hour between 7 and 8 a.m., and we tried this for a week. And the pilot was very successful, so we are now working on a project that will implement this permanently, and the street will be permanently closed for cars. If we already have a draft design, we present it to our inhabitants, we do an exhibition. It's always a good idea to just meet outside rather than somewhere in a local gym or something. So we meet outside, we present the project, and people can ask questions and interact. We have a spokesperson, so she takes the brunt of the communication, especially with the media, so she publishes press releases and communicates with the media. We also have information panels in the public space that are a permanent part of the city. And our spokesperson is also responsible for our Facebook page, and it's actually been deemed one of the best, second best in the Czech Republic. Our mayor has his own YouTube channel, using it to answer questions. So you can ask a question, and every week there is an episode answering those. For some projects, we create a dedicated website. So, for example, for modern means of transport or cycling through Třebíč, we have a website. And the website includes all the information about the project. Sometimes we also provide legal background for the project. And you can also find tips for cycling trips around Třebíč and things like that. And then this brings me to my conclusion. I'd really like to invite you to come to Třebíč, because right now we have a campaign to support tourism. You know that there is a Czech confection that is called the windmill, and we actually have an actual windmill in Třebíč. So if you eat this special confection somewhere in Třebíč, you will get this tiny flag, and then if you go to our windmill and present this flag, you can visit it for free. Thank you very much, Petr. One question, unless there are some from the audience, but one question from me. We have heard a lot about tactical urbanism. Is there something that you just said, oh yeah, this is something that we are doing already, or is there something you would like to use? Well, actually, preparing actual construction, the whole process is so demanding that we don't really have the capacity for those temporary preliminary steps. But for example, the pilot of the school street, we could call a tactical urban project. Thank you very much.